Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and let me say this, there is never a dull moment when it comes to what is going on in U of A's world. I mean,
do you have a nice, relaxing President's Day, Eric? Nothing to report?
Shane, who gets President's Day off? Not me. I
actually do. It's an interesting company I work for, yeah.
You know, we probably should have recorded on Monday because there was some news that went down. We have a new athletic director. We'll talk about that. We have a extension for our basketball coach because apparently the Washington fans, so goes the reports online, are interested in one Tommy Lloyd. We'll talk about that as well. But Shane, there's a lot of good things that happen with U of A. We're going to talk men's basketball a little bit later on. Casey Jacobsen, Fox Sports and Pac-12 Network announcer going to join us.
Every Wildcat fan's favorite analyst. I think he's great.
I don't understand what
I think he's great. Some Wildcat fans don't, but he's one of my favorite guests.
Yeah, I think he's a very good announcer. I don't know what people are talking about. And I'll tell you if I think somebody's not good, Casey Jacobsen is plenty good as far as I'm concerned. So to each their own if you don't feel that way. All right, Shane, a lot of positives this week. Let's hear your standouts. I would assume with a lot of winning going on in sports, there's a lot of good to talk about.
Yeah, well, I got to go through these quicker now that we got more sports going on, but we'll get to it. Well, for the second week in a row, I got to mention and start off with Jaden Bradley. He followed up his 14-point game at Colorado with another season high 21 against ASU in the record blowout win over ASU. Jaden Bradley is 14 of 20 from the field in his last two games, has 6 assists, 4 steals, and he hasn't turned the ball over once in those 2 games. He keeps contributing like that off the bench. Arizona's going to be very tough to beat the rest of the way. On the women's basketball side, Isis Bay, one of the best names in college hoops, she came in averaging 4.9 points per game. She went 10 of 11 from the field and scored 29 points in Arizona's triple overtime win over Washington. Just in case you couldn't get enough triple overtime basketball at Arizona. Had another one last weekend. Her previous high at Arizona was 11 points, by the way. So not a great sign that Arizona had to go to 3 overtimes to beat a team that was 3-10 in the Pac-12, but they got the win, and she was a big reason for it. I want to mention Jackson Kent, sophomore pitcher for Arizona baseball, allowed 1 run on 4 hits in 6 innings and had 8 strikeouts in Arizona's season opening win over Northeastern. Arizona took 2 of 3 in that series to open the season, and they just had another big win on Tuesday as we're recording this Tuesday night. And then I want to mention Regan Shockey, freshman on the softball team. She hit 11 for 16 with 8 runs scored last weekend. Arizona went 5-1 of those games, and she's hitting .517 this season. So she has already made a big impact for the Wildcats.
Awesome. I mean, that's very, very encouraging and great to hear from all of those folks. Congratulations on their success. All right. It's time for Buy or Sell, presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. And there's a lot to buy and sell this week. Check out iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C. Get $5 off your purchase. And after you do purchase one of these beauties, mention Wildcat Country in the post-purchase survey.
Yes, please.
Shane and I will be very, very happy with you. All right. Shane, number 1, buy or sell. Desireé Reed-Francois, Arizona's new AD. Are you buying or are you selling?
How long is it going to be before we're just going to shorten that to DRF, by the way? it's a mouthful.
About one show. Yeah, DRF sounds good to me.
About one show, yeah. Got a buyer. I mean, it's a fantastic hire for Bobby Robbins. She did a great job at Missouri, great job at UNLV before then. The biggest thing, obviously, is she knows how to raise money, and she did that very well at Missouri. She's obviously got ties to Arizona, went to law school at Arizona. She actually recalled during her press conference earlier on Tuesday about how she actually was here in Tucson in 1997 when the men's basketball team won the national title. So it seems like you can't argue with a hire. I mean, especially considering the financial issues. I did note in the media release that Arizona was very careful to note where the money for bonuses and payouts will come from donors, not from the university doesn't have any money for other means. So I on the face of it, it looks like a home run. Arizona grabbed a great athletic director from an SEC school that was doing good things in some of the biggest sports, especially in football more recently. So it's impossible to know more right now, but I think on the face of it, it seems like a home run.
What an absolutely fantastic hire as far as I'm concerned. I don't really understand the doubt on this one. You just got a sitting AD with Arizona connections from an SEC school. Listen, we floated John Entz's name out there, and he seemed interesting based on the Fox Sports connection, him, formerly working under, Lute Olson as a basketball manager. But to get a sitting athletic director who has had success at UNLV, who's had success at Missouri, it's a phenomenal hire. And to get her to come and she's, apparently very, very good at raising money. And I hear that's it's been an issue. I've heard from multiple different people that Dave Hickey had trouble with that didn't really connect with some of the top boosters. So to have DRF in here, she seems like a boss. I mean, she seems like somebody who is not going to put up with any crap. And I don't believe that she's a puppet. I think you can throw that narrative out there.
Yeah.
And I think the other one that people want to talk about is Erica Barnes. I think Erica's fantastic. I know people that have worked for her and have said very, very good things in meeting her. She's very, very nice and great at what she does. And I hope that she maintains a role in the department. With that said, I don't think Dr. Robbins was going to give her a job because she wasn't his pick. And so there's an ego play here. This was really the last member of the athletic department that wasn't Dr. Robbins' pick, if you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, the significant, Brent Brennan, Tommy Lloyd, I don't know if Adia Barnes was. I'd have to double check the timeline on that one. Chip Hale was, if you're talking, and Caitlin Lowe, another one was. Yeah, if you're looking at the biggest sports for Arizona, Robbins had his hand pretty much in all of them.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this, and I don't think many people are thinking this way, but I did see one comment on social media. So I want anyone who thinks this is some sort of diversity hire or just Dr. Robbins is just trying to show how progressive he is by hiring a female, get your head out of your rear end, please. This was a fantastic hire. You look at her resume, it has nothing to do, and maybe her being a woman gives her certain advantages in certain areas of her job. I don't know, but that really had nothing to do with it. Just look at her resume. It's comparable to anyone else who would take this job seriously. And I think she's going to do fantastic work at Arizona.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Shane. I think I don't want to hear there's a lot of stupid things that have come out on social media. But if you look at how Missouri's reacted to it, not well.
Yeah.
And if you look at what the popular, let's say notable college sports personalities are saying about it, it's a home run. You got to give Dr. Robbins. You can say what you want about him. This seems like a really good hire.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is ASU ditched their athletic director over 3 months ago, and they still don't have a new one. Arizona took less than a month. It's just crazy. It's like, what did they? I don't want to talk about ASU a whole lot in this program, but it's crazy to think that they still haven't moved on it. And so I was thinking, well, maybe for whatever reason, Arizona's going to take it almost their time as well, especially with the budget issues. But being able to lock this in was outstanding. Outstanding hire.
Yeah, one thing I know is kind of a bonus question, Shane, that, we talked about the donors stepping up and paying for DRF, and they're also paying for Tommy Lloyd's raise and extension. And to get this done early with rumors about Washington, where the state that he came from, ditching Mike Hopkins at the end of the year. We've already seen Arizona lose one coach to Washington. Husky fans, give it up. You're not getting Tommy Lloyd. It's not happening. Get off your soapbox. Arizona's a better job than Washington. I don't think anybody's going to argue that.
I hadn't even actually, and to be truthful with you, Eric, I hadn't even heard about the Washington thing until you mentioned it just a couple minutes ago.
I saw it yesterday.
Okay.
I was like,
okay.
So
yeah, no, that's not happening. It is interesting that the Tommy Lloyd extension got done the same day that they announced the new athletic director, and but apparently they couldn't get the Jed Fish extension done. So I don't know if it had to do with optics. I think, I work in communications. I understand how much of it is just, perception and propaganda, for lack of a better term, but really optics has a lot to do with it. And so I think Arizona was comfortable announcing that Tommy Lloyd's extension, and also in that media release noting that the money is largely coming from donors, or maybe all coming from donors. It was all part of a strategic move to where, okay, we think the optics now are okay to release this information. But it is interesting they were able to get Tommy Lloyd's contract extension done and not Jed Fish's.
All right, let me say this, Shane, and I know this may sound a little foolish, but think about it at more than surface level, as not just to you, but to those out there. So Jed Fish is a guy that has been a career job hopper.
Yeah.
Tommy Lloyd is just the opposite. Entire career as Mark Few's #1 assistant at Gonzaga, comes out to Arizona, gets his first head coaching job, and basically says, I'm not going anywhere. Whereas now Jedd Fisch did a great job, don't get me wrong, but you knew Jedd wasn't going to be long for Arizona. So, I mean, is there really a point, like, you're getting Jedd Fisch an extension to be gone in what, another year or two? We all knew that one more year of success, Jedd Fisch was gone. This happened a year sooner than we thought, honestly.
Yeah. And it is interesting. The last thing I'll say is it's interesting that, and I understand why Arizona's a basketball school, but in a world where college football rules the revenue by by almost like a 4-1 margin over men's basketball, Tommy Lloyd, Arizona's men's basketball head coach, is going to make more than twice as much as their football coach, at least before bonuses. It's just interesting to see how that works out. I get it. It's just interesting.
Now, of course, and I think there is something to that is interesting optics. But if you're Brent Brennan, listen, you just got a big raise from San Jose State.
Oh, yeah.
And Brent Brennan, I mean, it probably thinking, hey, I'm never getting a job this big outside of Arizona. Another guy, Tommy Lloyd, glad to be here. He's not taking another job, especially with what he's being paid now. Brent Brennan, not going anywhere. If he's not considering UCLA, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. He's not going anywhere. Arizona's, I mean, you and I have done this show since August 2020, and we've talked about this a lot, the different coaching changes that we've gone through. Now, 2 from football, 1 from basketball, 1 from softball, 1 from baseball, and an AD.
Yeah.
What's next? Hopefully not women's basketball, and hopefully not our school president. I don't know if that really, pertains to this particular show that much. But regardless, I don't think we're going to see a lot of coaching changes. I mean, maybe Chip Hale, I would say. I think Caitlin Lowe probably has earned another year one way or the other. Chip Hale's probably the next closest one. I think Adia's probably here to stay unless she were to want to go somewhere else. But I think we're probably good for the time being. And I want to commend Arizona's big donors for being able to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see. You never know. The only thing constant is change, especially these days. But you would think that would be the situation. Yes.
Do you think Tommy Lloyd ran up the score on purpose on Saturday night, buy or sell?
I will. Well, I'm somewhere in the middle on this. I think I'll sell in that. I mean, he put reserves in pretty quick when it was obvious that it was over. But I will buy that they kept their foot on the gas. They didn't run out the shot clock. They were calling plays and they were trying to. They're trying to get their guys points, and I don't know if it was so much running up the score so much as that number one, ASU just isn't very good, and number two, I think Tommy wanted to get his guys, get those reserves some good playing time. I think it if nothing else, it boosts team morale. So I'll hedge a little bit on it, but I will mostly sell it.
Let's just say the last time that Arizona State played in McHale Center before last Saturday night was a very unsatisfactory ending. For all of us listening to this program.
Sure.
Tommy Lloyd didn't forget it.
Yeah.
With that said, I am a little concerned because I think that there was an element of running up the score. So when they play each other next week in Tempe, yeah, I'm a little concerned about that game. I mean, people are gonna say, ASU stink. I mean, it's tough to avenge a 45-point blowout in 2 weeks, but you never know on the road.
Yep.
Now, Arizona seems to have found its groove. They're playing really good basketball. They have a tough game against Washington State on Thursday. If they take care of business there, I mean, Shane, I gotta admit, you were right the other week. I was wrong. I'm gonna own it. I said Arizona had absolutely no chance of getting a number 1 seed. I mean, right now they are in the driver's seat. Take care of business, and they should be number 1 in the West. And we can, make it to the Final Four and let it all play out from there. But Final Four in Arizona. It would be a dream come true for all of us. Let's not talk about UConn or Purdue or Kansas or whomever else you want to refer to, Houston. There, win your region, get to the Final Four. We'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think in a lot of years, they might not be in consideration for a 1 seed, but the UConn and Purdue are the 2 best teams in college basketball, and even Purdue lost to Ohio State this past weekend.
Yeah.
But UConn has 2 losses. Everyone else, GCU also has 2. Credit to them, but obviously they don't play the kind of schedule that the power conferences do. So there's a lot of teams. If you look at the top 10, 5 losses, 6 losses, 5 losses. It's down the line. There no one has come close to going undefeated this season. And so it's a bit of a little more of a free for all at the top. And that's where Arizona's quality non-conference wins come into play. And some of their wins in the conference as well, including a Washington State home game that, go figure, may end up being a quad one win if they're able to get it. Because Washington State is right on that cusp. If they can get in the top 30, a top 30 home win would be a quad one. So Arizona's resume is competitive with just about anyone's in the country. And right now, I mean, we saw the pre-selection Sunday top 16 for what it's worth, and Arizona was a 1 seed. And so there's no reason to think they can't maintain that. Maybe they could fit in one more loss in there, depending on what some other teams do. But again, I'm not too hung up on the 1 seed, but certainly I think that they are worthy of the 1 seed in the West at this point.
All right, let's talk about some players that maybe are a little bit under the radar. You mentioned Jaden Bradley. So this question, or this buy or sell, more Jaden Bradley, more Conrad Martinez, more Paulius Morauskas.
I will buy Jaden Bradley for sure.
Okay.
The other two, I think both Morauskas and Conrad Martinez can both be key pieces in the future. Not necessarily this season. I mean, if they need to spell some guys in foul trouble, like Conrad Martinez did against Colorado, then sure, that's fine. And he's a little action that he's seen. Certainly he could, but I think. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary to tinker right now. And Tommy Lloyd seems to like to keep a pretty short rotation. He likes to really have 8 guys at most in most games. Even last year he was down to 7, and maybe that was by necessity. But I think he likes to keep that pretty tight. So as much as he'd like to get everyone some playing time, which is again why I think that Arizona, they put their bench players in, but they sort of stayed aggressive against ASU because they wanted to get those guys time and boost their morale if they need them. So Morauskas and Martinez, I think they could both make a big difference next season. I don't think it's going to happen this season. Hopefully they won't be needed. Put it that way. Jaden Bradley, yes, he's finally hit his stride, and you combine him with if Kylan Boswell is able to just be average, average Kylan Boswell with how Jaden Bradley's played the last couple of games, the sky's the limit.
I'll tell you what, Arizona, I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves, Shane, but looking at what they have returning in the backcourt next year, as on paper, Boswell, Bradley, KJ Lewis, and Conrad Martinez, not to mention a Morauskas. I mean, this is, and that's not including some of the highly touted freshmen that are coming in. Plus, they'll probably bring in a grad transfer to, I mean, this is KJ Lewis, is going to blow up next year. I think he has a chance to be Big 12 first, second team if he gets the playing time. I mean, that guy's a baller. Boswell, with another year in the program, Bradley with another year in the program. I mean, and Martinez, the fact that Tommy played him in more minutes against Colorado, I mean, that kid looks sharp. Tell you what, they got something there that we didn't really think much of.
Yeah, Arizona has, I think, 7 legitimately very good starting caliber players. They also have Krivas, who is good enough to fill in for Umar Balo as needed. I think that's where they're at. I think that on most top 25 teams, or maybe on all of them, Jaden Bradley and KJ Lewis could easily be starters. I don't know about Krivas. Again, I think he's more there to spell.
Oh yeah, I think
Balo.
he would start. He would start on a lot of teams. I don't know about top 25, but yes.
Yeah. But I think that's where Arizona's at, and so it's just a matter of, so sometimes when in the season you're like, okay, Arizona's got to turn a corner before we get to March, and then other times like now it's like, is it March yet? Can we just start the tournament tomorrow? And we're in one of those periods, and so you just never know how the team's going to enter the tournament. But right now, they could keep that mojo going into the NCAA tournament. They could beat anyone.
All right, let's talk a little football here. So they announced the schedule, kind of the themes for next year. And normally the family weekend is before the homecoming game, but not this year. Homecoming's a little earlier than I can remember in a long time because Arizona scheduled it against Colorado. So I'm going to sell that this was a good move. I'm going to explain mine first, and then I'll let you kind of go from there. Do you really need, like, Dion was going to draw regardless? Do you really need to make it a theme game? Like, you couldn't have done the West Virginia game, the first Big 12 game, or not West Virginia, what I think is West Virginia, as the first, like, you couldn't have done that as your first family weekend or your first kind of theme game. Like, do you really need to do homecoming against Colorado? I just think I think it's kind of gimmicky, and I think they're missing out on an opportunity. I don't love this from the athletic department. What do you think?
I agree. I don't think it's that big a deal, but I agree that I think I don't know if you want to strategically try to place your homecoming game against an opponent you're trying to draw more for, because a lot of people go to the homecoming celebration and don't go to the game anyway. But to your point, I do think that Colorado is a draw just because Deion Sanders is the head coach for as long as that's going to happen. So I know it's bizarre having homecoming before family weekend, because typically it's the other way around, isn't it? I don't follow that stuff quite as closely as most people do. So I don't know the reason behind it other than they just want to get more hype for the Colorado, which is funny because Colorado finished last in the Pac-12 last season. But
Right.
but Deion Sanders was still a Sportsman of the Year or whatever from Sports Illustrated. So it's going to be a hype game regardless, and it is one of the remaining rivals, I guess you could say, from the Pac-12 that's going to be joining Arizona. I think if Utah were at home, that probably would have been the homecoming game. So if it worked in terms of timing, but I don't get too worked up about that stuff because I don't think homecoming. There's been complaints in recent years about people going to the celebration but not going to the game. So I don't get too worked up about it, but it was a little bizarre. Yeah.
All right, looking at Arizona's home games again, you got New Mexico is the first one, then NAU the following week. Then about a month later, 4 weeks later, you're Texas Tech. Now that's your inaugural Big 12 home game. So I think they were thinking, all right, hey, we're gonna, you can make a deal out of that. Then it's homecoming 2 weeks later. The next week against West Virginia is family weekend. And then you've got Community Day against Houston. The reason they couldn't make that one of homecoming or whatnot is because that could be a Thursday or Friday game. They haven't decided which day that is. So that's why they couldn't do that. So I kind of understand it, but I would have, if it was me, I would have made family weekend against Texas Tech. Colorado is going to get whatever, and then I would have made homecoming against West Virginia. Just me. And then, of course, ASU, obviously, Territorial Cup Senior Day. That will be quite the atmosphere. Brent Brennan's first Territorial Cup game as head coach for Arizona. Certainly interesting. All right, and the last one kind of for football here. So Dennis Dodd, who we've had on this program from CBS Sports, graded all of the new head coaches, Shane. I don't know if you saw this article, but he graded all of them. Who was the top coach that he gave an A to?
That would be ours. That would be Brent Brennan, just ahead of Jed Fish.
How about that? So Brent Brennan got an A, Jed Fish a B+. Do you actually agree? Like, I know we had Brent Brennan on and we had a good rapport with him.
Yeah.
But do you agree with his grade that this was an A higher?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yes, I do consider it. And I think what Dennis Dodd was doing was reading his reasoning is considering the circumstances, the financial circumstances at Arizona. Yes, it was a great hire because Brent Brennan is a coach who, like Dennis Dodd pointed out, you can win the Mountain West of San Jose State. You can do just about anything. Yeah. So I think that was his point. Plus the budget shortfall, which again, it's a bit apples and oranges because that money largely comes from donors to pay head coaches anyway, or for pay bumps and bonuses and everything. So I think a little too much has been made of that from an athletic perspective. But I agree with him from that point of view. It was interesting to see him get a bigger grade or higher grade than what he gave Jed Fish. And I think maybe he's sort of grading Arizona on a curve for that reason. But I think what I'm thinking, and I mentioned this before, maybe what he's thinking is, look, if Arizona can basically ride the wave of a Jed Fish who was never going to stay long term, and basically hand over that situation, that good situation, to a guy who is more likely to stay long term and can coach, obviously, then that might be the best situation for Arizona. From that perspective, I think he nailed it. As far as how well Brent's going to do, we'll have to wait and see. Still some concerns going into the season for me, which I know we'll talk about more going forward, but I don't disagree with his assessment for the reasons he gave.
Very, very interesting. I'm all for it. It's nice to see that on the national scale, the Brent Brennan hire is getting significant credit. Jed Fish hire for Washington was fine for this year until Florida
for this year.
Up.
Yep.
Okay. Coming up next, Casey Jacobsen will give us his thoughts on Arizona basketball here in Wildcat Country.
What's What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, every time I listen to a college basketball game on Fox, not every time, but like so often I hear Casey Jacobsen's voice. It's like he's in this place, he's in that place. Well, now it's glad to have him back on Wildcat Country. Casey, as I said, very happy to have you back on the show with Shane and I. Just when it comes to Arizona basketball, do you think they are worthy right now of a number one seed if the season were to end right now?
Yeah, I do. First of all, good to be with you guys again. I was working the studio show for Fox on Saturday, and it was before the selection committee did their reveal of the top 16. And my producers asked me to do my own version before it was revealed. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'll do my own version. I'm not a bracketologist, but I studied the teams and I took a swing. I put Arizona on my one line. It wasn't like super easy or clear because, Marquette had been playing really well until they got blown out by UConn. There were some other teams that North Carolina certainly had some quad one victories up there and had a really strong start to their year. But to me, Arizona, the way that they scheduled in the non-conference and what they did, the way that they've been playing lately, it's not just about wins. So there's several factors to this. There is who you beat, right, is more important to me personally than who you lost to. Who you lost to matters now. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but who you beat shows me what your team is capable of. And I'm a big proponent of, I really feel like we should reward teams and programs that go out and schedule tough. Do not reward teams and programs that take the cupcake route and are trying to stack wins against teams that are ranked 150, 200, 250. It does not impress me. There is a little bit of leeway. You want to give some teams to get better. There are some times where a team needs confidence. Maybe they got young players. Maybe they have more transfers than normal. So I'll allow a little bit of that. But for the most part, if you're a team like Arizona, Michigan State, Michigan, Gonzaga, teams that we know about, go and take a swing. Even if you lose some of those games, I'm not going to dock you. So Arizona loses to Purdue. To me, I don't care. They were competitive in that game, had a chance. And then they bounced back and beat a really dangerous and good Alabama team. Showed me a lot about Arizona, what they're trying to do, what they're capable of. So there was some teams like North Carolina who did not challenge themselves to me in the same exact way that Arizona did. And there was some other teams that did challenge themselves like Alabama and did not win enough games to be on that 2 line. That's why Alabama was on the 3 for me. So.
Yeah, I'm smiling because but this is like the 88th time that Eric's been shot down because he was afraid of Arizona's non-conference schedule, and it turns out it worked out pretty well for him. It's like there's no downside to playing those games. And I did see you in studio. I didn't realize that was before the top 16 was announced because yours looked almost identical to the top 16.
My producer sent me a text afterwards and congratulated me because Mike DeCourcy is our bracketologist at Fox, and Mike DeCourcy had 3 teams missing, and I got all of them. So they were like, Mike DeCourcy, look out for your job. I'm like, no, I don't want to be a bracketologist, please. But yeah, I did get all of them right.
Yeah, you nailed it. I was very impressed. I did see that segment online. So every time we have you on, Casey, I like to go over your criteria for a Final Four team. And your criteria, and I think I'd memorized it by now. Let's see. Great guard play, a top 20 defense in Ken Palm, NBA draft picks, future NBA draft picks, and experience. Obviously the top 20, we can tell Arizona checks that box because I think they're number 12 in Ken Palm as of this recording. The other 3, where do you think Arizona falls?
So actually there's, if I can tweak it a little bit. So it's actually, you got to be ranked top 40 defense and top 25 offense. So you need to be a balanced team. You do not have to be the best defensive team in the country. You just have to be good enough. We've seen that. And I talk about that on a lot of the conversations I have on studio show. I don't demand for you to make a Final Four to be a legit national championship contender. I don't demand that your defense be Houston's. I don't. It must be good enough. Last year's team for Arizona, their defense wasn't good enough. I think they finished 47th off the top of my head. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was 47 or 49 they finished in defensive efficiency last year. And it's not good enough. And a team, for example, this year, Kentucky Wildcats are top 10 in the country in offense, and their defense is 105th or somewhere around there, 102nd. They're not good enough. So to me, they're not a legit national title contender. So, but yeah, the rest of the criteria you got right. 45 of the last 46 national champions have had a first round draft pick on their team. That one is the hardest. So like there's two that are hard to kind of put numbers on. First of all, I don't know how the draft's going to play out. So I don't exactly know. It just happens to show the evidence. You have to have a first round draft pick on your team to win a national title. It is what it is. Don't ask me. That's just what the numbers say. So you always have to ask yourself, if you're an Arizona Wildcat fan, do we have one or multiple first round potential draft picks? Now, if certain guys play well in the tournament, can they play themselves into a first round pick? Absolutely. Like, let's say Pelle Larsson has an awesome tournament. Like Pelle Larsson to me is already an NBA caliber player. If he has an awesome tournament, could he be like the 24th pick in the draft? Heck yeah. So there's some of that. It's kind of a moving target. And then the other one that's a moving target is like good guard play. It's hard to quantify like exactly. There isn't like a points per game or assists per game average in your backcourt. It's more like you kind of know it when you see it. If you have guards that are really hard to trust or consistently come up short in big moments, either one, that's not a good sign. It's a red flag and will likely, not guaranteed, but it's likely going to mean that you're not going to go as far as you think.
Casey, I think one of the themes are, this is kind of anecdotal on my part, but I feel like this team needs a challenge to play well. Like I feel like when they get a little bored, they don't play as well. And I think it's not a coincidence that they've won on the road at some of the tougher places to play in the Pac-12, like Oregon and Colorado and Utah, and they come up short at Washington State and Oregon State and forgive me, Stanford. But it seems like they need that kind of, I don't know, that energy in the gym. Do you feel like that the team kind of plays that way?
Yeah, I've said it a couple of times on the games that I've done. I've called 5 Arizona games, and I've said it on a few of them. Here's what it is. And they're not the only team that's like this, but they are like it. They need to be properly motivated. And I don't know why that is or how the coaching staff has to do it. And I actually don't think that it should actually come down to the coaching staff. The best teams are player-led. But it is clear to me that Arizona, when motivated, is absolutely one of the top teams in the country. They are not as good. They certainly haven't been as consistent as the UConn Huskies have been. There's no question about that. But it's not like on a neutral floor they wouldn't have a chance. Of course, Arizona would have a chance against UConn, but they'd have to play really well. But there's a few things that I've noticed about this Arizona team, right? So I mentioned the first one already. They lose a really close game to Purdue, a great test for them. And then they bounce back just a few nights later against a completely different challenge in Alabama's offense. And they're able to beat Alabama. They're coming off a loss against Oregon State, a bad one, where Oregon State hit a few lucky shots, including that step back, tough one, right? Really, really bad loss. The only quad 3 loss that Arizona has on its resume right now. And 2 nights later, I'm on the call on the sideline in Eugene, and that game was clear from the first 5 minutes that Caleb Love was locked in, that the team defensively was locked in, that Kylan Boswell was ready to go, and they were ready. And they thumped what I thought is a pretty good Oregon team, especially at home. Like that's a nice win. And then you just saw it again against Arizona State. Now, Arizona State Sun Devils are not a super good basketball team, but I will say that in those rivalry games, throw that crap out the window, man. That stuff, it's crazy. And Arizona last year got beat on that Des Cambridge buzzer beater, so they were obviously motivated even more so than a normal rivalry game, and they beat them by 45 points. So there's evidence A, B, and C that says when this team is right, there is nobody, certainly in the Pac-12, that can stand in their way. And I would argue that there's only maybe 2 teams in the country when they're properly motivated that I would pick. Maybe Houston. I'd actually be curious to see Arizona play against Houston, what that would be like. But
I want no part of Houston again, Casey.
Yeah, no one does. No one does, Shane. I certainly don't. But I would say like a small handful of teams when Arizona's right, I would be like confident that they're going to beat everyone except for a small handful of teams.
As we record this interview, 15 minutes left in the game. Creighton up by 17 on UConn on FS1. So you just never know what's going to happen in college basketball. Casey, what are your thoughts on Kylan Boswell? It seems like he's taken a step back this year, especially in games that Arizona loses. But then other games, he looks like he's a star. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you can't be a star unless you're consistent, right? So I understand what you're saying. Kylan was hoping to be a star. Kylan was hoping to be a first-round draft pick this year. He's probably played himself off of that list, but hey, we still got season to go. And I think, he's only a sophomore, so let's not write this kid off. But certainly it hasn't been a consistently good season. I think that's fair. And if Kylan was on our right here with us, he'd admit the same. There were everybody has a stinker of a game. Like even the best players do. Kylan's had too many though. He's had too many games where he's been completely invisible. A few come to mind. Like he had against Washington State, they're going to play again soon. 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists in that 3-point loss at Washington. That was certainly a red flag. I said, wow, that's hard to do. When he played over half the game, 25 minutes, and just nothing across the board. And then Oregon State, not too long after that, I believe it was less than 2 weeks later, 0 points in 23 minutes on just 3 shots. So when I see stuff like that, I'm like, okay, he's certainly struggling with confidence, and I've seen him be hesitant. Here's the thing with Kylan, in my opinion. He's a young player who hasn't fully found himself or his confidence. He he's capable of being a very good defensive player, but his effort level and focus level on that end is almost determined by whether or not his jump shot is falling. And that to me is something that he's got to address. You can be the point guard and not make shots, but can you still guard your position at an elite level? And can you still create an elite level? And it seems like when his jumper's not going, his entire game shuts off. And that's weird to me.
All right. So the other player that Arizona fans have critiqued this year is Umar Balo, whose free throws, I guess they're slightly better than they were, but that's not saying a heck of a lot. Is Umar Balo a liability potentially in the tournament for Arizona?
Yes, at the very, very end of games, but up until I would say the last couple of minutes, he's not. I understand fans. You guys have to deal with a lot of these Arizona Wildcat fans on a level that I don't really like. I don't check Twitter. If I call an Arizona game, I don't check my mentions and see if Arizona Wildcat fans like me or dislike me. I'm sure there's plenty that hate me. Or would rather have Bill Walton calling games, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. Fans, though, can be frustrating because they often they live in two extreme worlds, right? You guys know this? Either their player is like the best, it's undisputed, he's amazing, no one can guard him, or he's the worst and a liability and the reason why we're losing. And they think about their coaches this way too. They're the best coach in the conference, or we got to fire him tomorrow. He's a bum. He can't do anything. I don't live in that world. When I watch basketball, that's not how I see it. When I watch Umar Balo, let me also go back to something that I always kind of lean on in my life. I'm no philosopher, right? But what I've learned is success is often determined by our expectations of something. If we expect something to be incredible and it's pretty good, it's a disappointment. If we expect nothing from a player or a team and they all of a sudden grow and win and it's amazing, right? So going back that's success is often already determined by our expectations of that something. Umar Balo's expectation was to be arguably the second best center in the country behind Zach Edey. That was a take, right? Umar Balo is an All-American center, one of the best, definitely the best in the Pac-12. And what we come to find out is Caleb Love needed more shots. Keyshawn Johnson, pretty good in the early start of the year. Umar Balo was not the focal point of the offense. He was in the first couple weeks of the season. Caleb Love was the focal point. I remember Keyshawn Johnson had a great game against Duke, and he had a couple other games where I was like, "Whoa, holy mackerel! That guy barely scored at San Diego State, and now all of a sudden he's averaging 15, 16 a game for Arizona." So those shots are going to come from somewhere. And so offensively, his numbers aren't great. And then to the free throw thing, I mean, Umar Ball is probably not going to be a good free throw shooter for the rest of his career. That's the way it is. And he's not the only one. See Shaquille O'Neal and a lot of really good big guys that can't make free throws. So Umar Balo is still, to me, a 5 to 10, in between 5 and 10 ranked college big guys, that if they are all up for free agency and we're picking all the big guys in college basketball, he's probably going to go in between 5 and 10, somewhere in that. I'm going to select him there. That's pretty good. I mean, Arizona fans might still be pissed off at that, but that's pretty good to me.
And as kind of a variation of what one of my wife's favorite sayings is, our frustrations are a product of our expectations. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Let me look ahead to the Washington State game. It's all of a sudden it's a top 25 matchup. The Cougars are an overtime loss against Cal away from riding an 11-game winning streak right now. Isaac Jones had a monster game against Arizona the first time they played. Miles Rice has been phenomenal as a freshman. How do you see that game playing out at McHale?
I think it'll be a little bit different. That was a pretty low scoring game. On the Palouse. I think it finished 73-70. That's exactly the way that Kyle Smith, their head coach, wants it. This is a team that is going to slow it down. They are 310th in the country in tempo. Okay. So that's on purpose. It's not an accident. They realize that when they play better teams, and they've been successful at this. By the way, Washington State's been knocking on the door for a couple of years. Kyle Smith has done a really, really nice job. They haven't been able to get over the hump until this year because they haven't been able to string together wins. And they've lacked some star power. And I feel like both Miles Rice has been a star in the backcourt for them at times that they didn't have last year, that scoring punch. And Isaac Jones has come out of nowhere for me, man. I didn't know who that guy was before the season started. He can play the forward or the center position, and he's really a playmaking forward, like a ball handler, not a three-point shooter, but like a ball handling, can take you off the bounce, can turn his back to the basket. I mean, Arizona fans saw him. He gave him the business. So yeah, I just think the difference between last year or the year before's Washington State teams, they actually have two stars, one in the backcourt, one in the front court, that at times can rescue their offense that can, that otherwise would be really in trouble. I think at McHale, it's not going to be a 70-73 game. It'll be a higher tempo than that. So Washington State knows that, I think. What I think is interesting is Arizona's only lost 2 games at home in 3 years. One of them was against Washington State. That's interesting. And so obviously Kyle Smith has been able to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember that game 2 years ago, but did they rain in threes in that game? Did they just have one of those nights, Washington State?
I think if I remember correctly, it was just a game that Arizona was sluggish, and we thought they were going to come back, and Washington State just kept their foot on the gas. It wasn't like it was a blowout, but Arizona just wasn't able to catch up.
Yeah, there's so many games where the fans really drag Arizona past the finish line when they don't play well, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen in that game.
Yeah, I was at one of those games, by the way, the USC game at home this year. That game was sluggish. UCLA is probably another one. UCLA and USC, both in the McHale Center. Arizona was flat as pancakes in both of those games, and the crowd was like, "Come on, guys, we got you. Let's find the energy." Yeah, but that seems like a while ago that they were struggling with some of that stuff. So anyway, so Arizona play their own game, want to play a little bit more up tempo. You're gonna have to turn Miles Rice over a little bit. I haven't checked Miles Rice's road splits. I'm always interested in young players. As a broadcaster, when I prepare for a game, when I get to young players, I always want to go, how do they play on the road? Usually it's very, very significantly different. They don't play nearly as well at home. And I can't answer that right now. Wasn't prepared for that, but I'd be interested to see Miles Rice, his performances on the road versus at home. And so, usually it's Miles Rice's first time in McHale, guys.
I got some stats for you. 16
Yeah.
games at home, 15.9 points a game, 10 games on the road, 15.8 points a game.
Wow, good for him. That's a great sign. That's rare, by the way. I do this all the time, and that's very rare. So, well, you know what? It's one of the reasons why Washington State has got a streak, because they actually have a freshman that is performing on the road like he is at home. And that's how you stack wins in a power conference. You watch everyone else, like a Stanford, for example. You guys are familiar with Stanford. They beat the crap out of you guys by 20 points. They have a freshman point guard, Kanan Carlisle, is really good. He is not nearly as good on the road. And that's why Stanford is like this. Stanford can beat anybody, they can lose anybody. Beat anybody, they can lose anybody. Happens like that. Kanan Carlisle is going to be a really good player. I think he'll be an NBA player someday. But yeah, those young point guards on the road can be a roller coaster ride.
All right, Casey, my last question for you. Thanks as always for joining us. We really appreciate it. Do we make too big a deal out of the 1 seed in the NCAA tournament? I mean, I think back to Arizona a couple of years ago, and they barely get to the Sweet 16 and then lose to a Houston team that was seeded number 5 for whatever reason. A couple of 1 seeds have lost in recent years. I feel like it's more just about matchups and kind of luck of the draw. What do you think?
I do not think that we make a too big a deal about 1 seeds. I think that the NCAA tournament is extremely difficult, and you really need every break that's possible to get. And the numbers also back it up. Top 4 seeds have a much significant better chance. They have a better chance of getting to a Final Four. High seeds have a much better chance of getting to a national championship. Only 2 Final Fours in the last 32 years have not included a 1 seed. Okay, only 2 of the last 32 years have not had any 1 seeds in them. Last year was one of those years. Last year, the 2023 Final Four, I think, was a 4 seed, a 5 seed, a 5 seed, and a 9 seed. UConn won the national championship as a 4 seed because they struggled for a month in the Big East Conference, but they were dominant in every other aspect, right? So I have personal experience with this. I played 3 years at Stanford. I was a number 1 seed. We were a number 1 seed 2 of those 3 years. And the last thing I'll say about a number 1 seed is this: having experience with it, the second round is the one you need to worry. So I don't know if we're going to have another conversation between now and tournament, and I don't know if Arizona's going to get a number 1 seed or not. But if they do, you best beware of the 8-9 game. It is.
We remember very well Arizona TCU 2 years ago.
Correct. Yep. That overtime game. Eddie Lampkin had like 20-something points against Coloco. I remember that one, but you guys survived it. So my freshman year, we won our first round game by 1,000,000 points. Our second round game was North Carolina, who had struggled all year. They were basically like Kentucky. They were super talented NBA players, but they just couldn't figure it out. They were, for whatever reason, they just got smacked around in the ACC. They get an 8 seed, and we got to play them, and they are just as big, just as physical, and more athletic than us. It was like, whoa, we're a number 1 seed. We're playing North Carolina. This is some crap. It happens every year to teams. So that's the one. And our other number 1 seed, we got all the way to the Elite 8. We lost to Maryland, who had Juan Dixon and Steve Blake and Chris Wilcox and that whole group. That was a good team and a good game. So no regrets there. But it's important. So Shane, to answer your question, we don't make it too big a deal of the 1 seed. It's super important and allows you a better statistical chance we have data now. It's a better chance to get there. But man, does that 8-9 game make me just sweat bullets thinking about it. It's going to be tough.
Well, you could say the same 7-10. I mean, that's also if the 7 seed wins, it's essentially the same thing. But I get your point there. All right, last question for you. Always great to chat with you. We know that the Pac-12 is going bye-bye after this year. Your Stanford team going to the ACC, Arizona going to the Big 12. What will you miss most about the conference?
Well, I have my own memories. So I'm still going to call games. I'm still going to possibly call an Arizona against Stanford game non-conference. Like they will still play each other, not every year, but randomly. They will still play. Okay. But I will miss the memories that I have in the conference as I watch my alma mater, Stanford, play Boston College, Miami, Duke, Carolina, Virginia in the ACC, which is the most bizarre thing ever. I don't have a connection to that conference and to those other universities. I'm disconnected from that. The memories I have of playing at the McHale Center against Gilbert Arenas, Richard Jefferson, Jason Gardner, Michael Wright, Luke Walton. Those were the best Pac-10 games that I was involved. Talent all over the floor, NBA players all over the floor, both teams ranked in the top 10, crowd going nuts, Dick Vitale on the sideline calling games. I felt like I was in the conference when it was probably at its greatest, or I can certainly make an argument that it was at its greatest as far as the talent, the pro talent that was on UCLA, Arizona, Stanford, USC, Oregon, because it was the era before one and dones. So guys stayed a long time, And so the top teams had multiple NBA players on it, which just certainly is not the case anymore. The best teams in the Pac-12 have 2 NBA players, 2, and that's it, about roughly. And so, yeah, like those are the memories I have of like playing against those UCLA teams and the Arizona teams and the Oregon teams. And, it's not necessarily about the I'm going to miss, like everything about the conference. I'm just going to have these memories that I'm not going to be able to recall. Is that weird to say? Like,
yeah,
you understand?
No, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
I have those memories, but they're not going to be easily recalled because I'm not going to be calling a lot. You don't call Pac-12 games anymore. We don't, it's going to be, I'll feel way older too. I'll be like, telling my kids or anybody like, oh, I played in this conference called the Pac-12. Like, what's that? In 10 years, they'll be like, what's the Pac-10? What's the Pac-12? What is that? That'll make me feel old and weird.
That's really sad. I didn't think about that. Yeah. Like when my son's old enough to care about sports, he's going to ask, what's the Pac-12? That's really on that, that's depressing. Thanks, Casey.
All right, bonus question for you, Casey. What's the loudest college arena you've ever played in?
They were all loud. When you're ranked number 1, I mean, Arizona knows this a little bit. When you're ranked number 1, every arena you go into is loud. So like for Stanford, have you guys played at Haas Pavilion yet this year?
We did and lost by 18.
No. You guys beat.
No, they blew out Cal. Lost.
Oh, Cal.
Sorry,
You're
thinking Maples.
Yeah,
Maples versus Haas.
Yeah,
Yes.
my bad.
Can I make a case that actually Stanford was the loudest? I know that's a weird answer to your question, but people do not understand how loud and raucous Maples Pavilion was when we were ranked number 1, and people were lining up down the block to get in. Our student section was as crazy as any. Our floor was bouncy. Our floor had like a little bit of give, and so when the students would jump up and down, the whole building felt like it was rocking. That seems like a really, really long time ago, because now I would say Stanford's one of the quietest gyms that you'll find in Pac-12. But Haas Pavilion, Cal absolutely hated us. We were ranked number 1 in the country, I think 2 of the 3 times we played there during my year. And you can imagine that, your rival when you're ranked number 1 and the vitriol that comes with that, and they're waiting on you. And that's a small gym too. So I would say those 2. Old Backcourt at Oregon was certainly loud. McHale Center would definitely be on that list. I don't know if I'd put it up at the very, very top, just because that building is a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And the student section isn't on top of you at McHale like it was at McCourt. McCourt was really small, and it really did feel like the students were right next to you and could almost like reach out and touch you.
I don't think there was a student section at Arizona. When did the Zona Zoo? Was that 2002 they got created?
Something like that. Yeah. Cause I remember 2004 was the first time I really remember it being like kind of behind the basket. We were all kind of spread out around the arena. So that's a great point. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah. So last thing on this, I've been asked about this question because there's been a lot of interview requests about the Pac-12, going away and kind of my feelings on it. But the question I've been asked a lot is, what's the hardest away court in the Pac-12 to play in? And I always answer this: it's not what makes a place hard to play is only two things, only two things. Number one, how good is the team? Literally, like if Arizona and Stanford are 1 and 2 in the country, they can play in a cardboard box, and it's going to be a tough place to play. If you're playing against one of the best teams in the country, it's hard to play. If you're playing against a crappy team in a great environment, it's not that difficult. Okay, so number one is how good the team is. And to me, number two in college basketball, how good is the student section? That doesn't mean it's not disrespectful to the other general admission or the old folks, but if your student section is loud and raucous the entire game consistently, those are the two things that make a home gym hard to play.
And that is the analysis that can't be topped. Casey, great to have you on once again. Great insight. And hopefully we get a chance to talk to you before the tournament.
Yeah, I'd like that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks to Casey Jacobsen for joining us. Great to catch up with him once again. Shane, we have a new partner that you can hear Wildcat Country on. Tell us about them.
So you can now find Wildcat Country on Autograph, which was co-founded by a former teammate of Wildcat legend Rob Gronkowski named Tom Brady. The whole idea of Autograph is they want to reward college sports fans simply for being fans. So you download the Autograph app on your phone, subscribe to the Arizona channel, and you'll find pretty much all the Arizona-related media content you already consume all in one place, including the Wildcat Country podcast. And for every story you read, every podcast episode you download, you accrue points that you can use to buy some cool stuff. So definitely check us out on Autograph. Please subscribe to the Arizona channel, and you'll help us out. And more importantly, we think you're going to like it a lot.
I think so too. Very cool. I have it on my phone. They've done a great job with it. And this could be, wave of the future. Obviously, Arizona is one of their earlier teams, but it'll be nice to see when they get a bunch of teams. Listen, if Tom Brady's behind it, probably into, he's had some pretty good success with a few things in his life.
He rode Gronk's coattails, but yeah, we'll give him some credit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Well, I did not ride your coattails nor vice versa last week in our basketball picks. We did not do so well as we both went 1-3. So let's just our record's not above 500. Time to turn it around here. Start with a Pac-12 road victory this week. Shane, which way are you heading?
Well, real quick, I think our picks for the ASU game combined, I think Arizona won by more than twice as much as what we combined to pick that they picked.
Well, close. We had combined by 24 and they won by 45.
Okay, I was close. Okay. You said Pac-12 road win.
Pac-12 road win. Yep.
Yeah, we'll go with Oregon over Stanford. Cardinal, they're slumping, even though they beat Arizona and they seem to have Arizona's number. Stanford just not playing well lately. Oregon desperately needs some wins to get into the NCAA tournament picture, which is still possible, not likely, but possible. So I'm going to go with the Ducks.
I'm going Oregon over Cal. So we're going for a Duck sweep this weekend here. All right, top 25 loss against an unranked team. I'm going New Mexico over Colorado State. Love New Mexico at home in the pit. What do you think, Shane?
That's a good one. I'll go with Kansas State over BYU. K-State lost a close game at BYU a couple of weeks ago. BYU is only 2-5 on the road this season, so give me K-State at home.
All right, we're looking for a top 10 upset this week by an unranked team. What do you have?
Yeah, it's a tough one this week, as it usually is. I'm going to go Wake Forest over Duke.
Yep, you and I agree on this one.
Yeah,
we're going the same one here.
Wake gave Duke a hard time at Cameron Indoor last week, and I think they might get over the hump this week. Wake Forest is a perfect 13-0 at home. 13-0 at home, excuse me. So I'll go with Wake Forest.
All right, here we go. Big games at McHale Center this weekend, Thursday night, 9:00. Arizona against Washington State, a ranked versus ranked matchup, one that we weren't really sure we were going to see at home the rest of the way. How many do you like Arizona by this in this game, Shane?
Yeah, how many people had this being the marquee matchup this late in the season in the Pac-12? But credit to the Cougars for what they've done. I'm going to take, well, let me break it down real quick. Washington State is legitimately one of the hottest teams in college basketball. You can laugh all you want, but they are. They're an overtime loss at Cal away from an 11-game winning streak. And that includes their win over Arizona and Pullman. Miles Rice is likely to be the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Had 18 points and 5 assists in their last meeting. And Washington State's a good defensive team. They're number 26 overall in KenPom in adjusted defense. I think the McHale crowd will do what they do a lot and get Arizona past the finish line in a game where maybe this team starts thinking they've hit their stride and they're going to roll over the Cougars. Is that mentality just can't help but seep in. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think they'll get the job done at McHale. So I'm going to take the Wildcats by 3 over Washington
By
State.
3,
Close game.
Shane.
Yep.
Whoa. I see. I listen, I think you're looking at a revenge game here. Wildcats are rolling Arizona by double digits. Give me Arizona by 11. All right. Washington at Arizona on Saturday. You have Arizona coming off a close victory.
Yeah.
How many do you have the Huskies faring? How do you have the Huskies faring against the Wildcats?
Yeah, the Huskies are actually a pretty good offensive team. They're number 2 in the conference and scoring behind, right behind Arizona. Not right behind Arizona. They're 10 points per game behind Arizona, but that still puts them number 2 in the conference. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Arizona for 40 minutes. I think after a bit of a scare against the Cougars, Arizona is going to be refocused and take care of business against the Huskies. Give me Arizona by 15.
15. I'm going 20 plus. I think this one is a blowout. Now that your 15 number is probably going to mean you're going to have Washington covering the spread.
Maybe.
Because I think Arizona, we've seen in these home games, I thought that ASU line was overinflated at 18 and a half, Shane. I was really surprised.
By the way, I've done something here that's cost me money, but I feel like it's for the good of the program because 3 times in the last month, I have picked Arizona against the spread with the simple hope that, okay, well, if they don't cover, at least I'll make something. And
picked against Arizona.
Against their, yeah. And every time I've been wrong, including ASU. So I may have to just put I've just bet a couple bucks in each game. I'm not blowing my life savings by any means, but I may just have to put a couple bucks against Arizona next time around, just to keep it rolling, because for whatever reason, that seems to be working.
Let's hope cynical Shane and his betting will appear during March Madness, because that is where
whatever works.
Whatever works. We're going to try to do, if there are immediate reactions for games in March Madness and some big stuff, maybe Shane and I will talk about doing some post shows or whatnot. We haven't done one in a while. We're nearing our 200th show, I believe.
Yeah, it's going up real quick. I was just going to say, maybe we got to see if our guy Chris Gronkowski is willing to give away a couple more ice shakers for our 200th. I bet he would.
Be kind of fun working on some new sponsors. So Wildcat Country made it almost 200. Pretty darn incredible that we've gotten this far. Thanks to Casey Jacobsen for being a guest on this edition of the program. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.